Japan, for many years, was the absolute poster child for this globalization. It was starting with the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, where Japan copied at a breakneck pace the West. And it was one of the countries that they actually caught up within a few decades to Western Europe, the United States, and then again, it's sort of after World War II. There was again this sort of breakneck copying where they copied cheap toys, cheap cars. It was treated as a joke by the U.S. for quite a while. But by the 1970s and 1980s, Japan had become this incredibly fearsome competitor. Right. And this is parenthetically one of the things that's a little bit tricky, I think, in the globalization dynamic, because when you copy things that work, you're often creating much more intense competition. And so that's always an aspect of it that's quite tricky. So even though Japan copying the United States was quite flattering, after 30, 40 years, they had copied us so well that they were, wiping out the car industry in the U.S. and all sorts of other sectors of our economy were under a lot more pressure because they, in a sense, copied us almost too well. Now, I think that if you go to Japan today, and I was in it for just a little over a week, but and I'd been there once before in 2000. I think the change over the last 15 years or so is it's a move away from globalization. They're much less interested in the United States. Fewer people are studying English. They're not even playing golf anymore. In the 1980s, golf was the rage. The golf courses are being turned into solar panel farms, but no one really wants to play golf anymore. There's still some interest in information technology, my industry, so they were interested in that part. But I think it is actually much less imitative, and it is no longer the Japan of the 1870s, or even the Japan of the 50s and 60s, or even of the golf courses of the 1980s. They are no longer interested in us, and so I think that's a striking move away from globalization in Japan that's happened, and I'm of course always much more interested in what this means about America than about Japan, and I think it's a disturbing. It should push us to ask some disturbing questions about America. Is our society less worthy of being emulated than it was in the past? Is Japan right that there isn't that much that it should copy, that there is not much left to learn from us? And so I think it should push us to ask some very tough questions in that direction. Japan is, it's just one country, but it's interesting because Japan was the most extreme on copying, and it was doing it so incredibly well for over 100 years. And the fact that they have stopped altogether, maybe something's gone badly wrong in Japan. But I think the critical question we should ask is, has something gone badly wrong in our society where it's no longer one that is producing as many new things that are worthy of being emulated? And so one way you could describe the dynamic was Japan sort of caught up to the U.S. There was not, at the end of the day, that much innovation that took place in Japan once they had caught up. And so they never really overtook us. And then it was just a country that was, maybe a third to 40% of the population of the United States, and it would never become a country with a larger GDP or anything like that. Now, you look at a country like China; it has 4 times the U.S. population, and so if China simply copies everything in the U.S., and if it were to catch up to the U.S., you might have a country that has a GDP 3 to 4 times that of the United States. It might not surpass the U.S. on a per capita basis, but geopolitically, that would be a much more important event where maybe the most important country in the world is the one with the largest GDP. Now, the way the U.S. Historically, or the Western world historically had stayed ahead was by advancing technology much more quickly. So if China's copying, but we're continually doing new things, then we would be able to stay ahead of India and China from a GDP perspective for a much longer period of time. But then that gets to the question of how healthy the state of technological progress is as well. So, but I think there's something a little bit different about China and India because they're simply on such a bigger scale.